Praise the Lord. Today, I'll be going through a number of questions that I do receive. These are questions, of course, related to praying in tongues. So I'll be going through a number of them. There are 6 in total. So I'll be answering those questions. And let's learn along as we go. So my name is Augustine. This channel is called Men Must Pray. So I did realize that the Lord has given me a lot of knowledge when it comes to praying in tongues. And 2, I also love praying in tongues. And so I decided to be making videos to answer people's questions related to praying in tongues. So of course, if you have questions that are related to praying in tongues, you can always ask. I will leave my email on the screen. And I'll do my best to answer those questions in person. And those that I can't answer in person, of course, I'll just make a video and then I'll answer them. So if you do love learning a lot about prayer and praying in tongues, of course, you're welcome to subscribe to this channel if you are not already subscribed. Also on that, on the same information that I've provided, I've included my donation, my PayPal email, because this work relies on your donations. So of course, your donations are the ones I use to run this work. So of course, if you do enjoy this work and you find it helpful and you are in a position, you can always send me a donation. I will greatly appreciate it. And I'm also sure the people who are not in a position to send a donation, they will greatly appreciate when you send a donation, because that enables me to also serve those people who may not be in a position to actually send a donation. Yeah, so that aside, let's get into the video. So question number 1, does praying in tongues at midnight have any spiritual significance? And simple answer, yes. Now, this is a question that I have received, not very many times, but there have been people who have had concerns asking about, is there any spiritual significance between the different times of the day and night when it comes to prayer? And it is a resounding yes from me. So, explanation. Well, this is how things work. The spiritual realm does rely on the physical realm. They are intertwined, actually. Okay, let me get a little bit analytical here. I hope you will understand and follow along. The world we live in is a 3-dimensional world. Basically, from simple mathematics that you learned in school, even if it was difficult, there is length, there is width, and then there is height. That is for a cube. And basically the world we live in is 3-dimensional. So basically it has length, it has width, and it has height. Now that, in biblical terms or spiritual terms, is what is called the physical world. It's the world that we live in. Ourselves, we are also 3-dimensional beings, right? And the houses that we have built, they are 3-dimensional. And basically, many objects that we use, they are 3-dimensional objects. So for us being 3-dimensional creatures, we can only make things in 3 dimensions or less. Now, the spiritual realm that people refer to as the spiritual realm, it basically begins from what? The 4th dimension. So of course, the 4th, 5th, 6th, going upwards, those other dimensions are what we normally refer to as the spiritual realm. Now, what happens in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd dimension, which is of course this physical world, is of course connected to the 4th dimension, 5th, and upwards as you go. Now, the thing is, any activity as you move through dimensions, it keeps changing. It's the same activity, but it has different forms. It takes different forms as you go through those dimensions. So something like prayer or praying in tongues, in the physical world that we, like the one we live in, the three-dimensional, we will usually just hear words that we cannot fully understand what they mean. But you see, as you start going up in those dimensions, you realize that what? The words that you are just speaking, they now become swords, they become fire, they become laws, they become what? Living beings, actually. Like the words come to life themselves and they become beings by themselves. So as you go through those dimensions, that's why you'll even see the Bible referring to the words that we speak differently. Sometimes it refers to them as fire. You see, like in the book of James chapter 3, when it says the tongues, like our tongues are a fire that cannot be quenched. And then there is the mention of the power of life and death lies in the tongue. So you see, those are just different dimensions. So in one dimension, your tongue is actually what? Produces fire. On another dimension, it is a law that determines life and death. You see, so just those different dimensions. Now, when it comes to praying in tongues, during the day and during the night, the key difference is the amount of words that people speak. Now, the words that people speak in the physical realm, even if they are not prayers, just words, they usually, as you go into the spiritual realm, they carry more significance and more weight. And that's why you'll see things like blessings and curses. You see, they are just words. They might have been spoken in English. Yes, a curse and a blessing, they can all be spoken in English. But when you go to the spiritual realm, they have different words. They carry different powers. A blessing will carry the positive power of God, the blessing part of God, the good energy from God. Then, of course, the curse will carry the negative energy from forces of darkness or those other negative forces. So the curse and the blessing are both in English, but you see, when they get in the spiritual realm, they are totally different powers. So when it comes to praying during the day and during the night, the big difference is what? The words. Because during the day, very many people are awake and very many people are speaking many things. And so those many things that they are speaking in the spiritual realm, of course, there is a lot of what? Activity, there's a lot of commotion. There are so many words that are being spoken. There's a lot that is being analyzed. There is a lot that is just going on in the spiritual realm during the day. And that makes it difficult for you who is praying, because there is a lot of noise, there is a lot of words going on. So praying naturally becomes a little complicated during the day, but at night, many people are asleep. So what happens is that at night, the spiritual realm is usually what? Very calm, with very little activity going on, because there are not very many people who are involved in the spiritual realm, because very many people are asleep. Now, because of that, when you make a prayer at night, you will realize that it is easier to actually break through than during the day. From my own experience, anytime I have prayed in tongues at night, it has always been a very easy task for me to actually get a breakthrough and feel like I am actually praying, compared to when I do it during the day. I think the most difficult time I have ever prayed in tongues was midday, because I realized that midday it seems to be the most difficult time to actually get yourself to break through in the spiritual realm. And it does make sense, because at midday is the very center, at the very middle of the day, and probably the time when most of the activities are, or most people are awake and a lot of activities are going on. Another important thing that also makes the difference between night and day is that during the day there is a lot of sin, because you see, when people are awake, most of the people are sinful. So they are doing sinful things, and those sinful things, they strengthen evil spirits, and those evil spirits, of course, they are empowered by that, the sinfulness going on, and they make it very difficult for someone who is praying, because when you pray, sometimes your angels have to be the intermediary between you and God. You see, your angel has to go back and forth between you and God, and that means that your angel finds a lot of resistance because of those evil spirits that have been empowered by the sin that is going on. So that makes praying a little difficult during the day, unless, of course, you are a very prayerful person and your angel is strong enough to tackle all those obstacles. So you just feel it easier even during the day. But even for people who are very good at praying, they will usually tell you there is a difference between praying during the day and during the night. So for those people who usually say there is not really a big difference between praying during the day and praying during the night, I guess for them it's because they have not grown to a spiritual level where they actually feel the difference. Because anytime you get deep in the spiritual things, you will realize that minor changes have a lot of impact. So praying during the day and praying during the night, it is a huge, like there is a huge difference between the two. So I hope I've answered that clearly. So if you are the kind of person who sometimes struggles to pray in tongues, then try and shift your prayer sessions to night time, because it will naturally be easier to pray at night than during the day. That is confirmed both physically speaking and even spiritually. Question number 2. How can I attract God's presence when I am praying in tongues? Well, this is another question that I do get quite often, because many times when I'm talking about praying in tongues, I'll mention things like having encounters and speaking to God and hearing from God. And most of these things, they happen when you have attracted the presence of God. And attracting the presence of God seems to be the most like the biggest determinant of how successful your praying in tongues session actually goes. Because if you can pray in tongues and actually attract the presence of God, what will happen is that you will get everything else that you desire. If you are praying for a breakthrough, of course, it is the presence of God that you need first. And once you have the presence of God, then you can now even ask for your breakthrough or receive your breakthrough, because asking for a breakthrough, you are asking for it from God. So that means you need to be in the presence of God. And number 2, if you are to receive any blessing from God, of course, you have to be in the presence of God to receive it from Him. So that's why cultivating the presence of God is one of the very key things that you need when you're praying in tongues. And the simplest answer to cultivating the presence of God is actually what? Purity. Because one thing is that God is very pure. He is very pure, and of course it's no surprise that actually God hates sin, that He doesn't like sin and defilement. You can read the book of Leviticus and you will see there are so many rules. There are purity laws, just how much purity God desires from His children. Because those were, somebody may say those, like that was the Old Testament. Yes, it was the Old Testament, but you see that is how God was trying to transform the spiritual requirements of purity to physical terms. So that's why He was putting up those many physical laws to help people keep themselves pure in spiritual terms, because most of those defiling things that were being talked about, they were physical things, and those physical things, they do relate to the spiritual world, and in the spiritual world they have a significance. So that's why God would set those rules. So some of them will not make sense because people will not understand how a certain physical activity actually translates to the spiritual realm, and how it is a requirement of purity. But you see, it is what it is. When God is telling you, of course, He understands the spiritual realm and the physical realm. And what happened is that as we have gone in time, knowledge has increased, just as the Bible tells us in the book of Daniel. So today, at least, we can know what goes on in the spiritual realm as well as in the physical, or the physical activities and the impact that they have in the spiritual realm. Today we can know that, and that is why some of those laws that never made sense at that time, right now they do make sense, because we can get the connection between the two. So if you want the presence of God, the easiest way and what is required of you is to actually just live a pure life. And a pure life basically means that, from the words of Jesus, He said it is not what goes into a man that actually defiles a man, but actually it is what comes out of a man. So basically it means you have to watch the words that you speak, mostly the words that you speak, and Yeah, mostly just the words that you speak and the things that you do. So how you treat other people and how you interact with other people. So because your interaction, your character comes from within. So that is, as it goes out, the actions you do to others, that is what actually determines if you are pure or not, because that is actually also what God uses to judge us if we are upright or wicked. Because a wicked person does wicked things, a righteous person walks in righteousness and uprightness. So if you want the presence of God when you are praying in tongues, you make sure that what? You walk in purity. And then one additional thing is that your internal character is shaped by what comes in you, what you receive. So basically, what comes in through your ears, what comes in through your eyes, and what comes in through your mouth. Yes, that also does go into shaping your internal structure, which now determines what will come out of you. So that's why you see, like when it comes to what comes in through our mouth, mostly it will be the food that we eat. And this is where some people do argue and say some foods are clean, some foods are unclean. But actually, it is not whether the food is clean or unclean. It is more about that if you pay too much attention on eating, then you will naturally do what? Forget about what? The spiritual things, because you'll be feeding your physical body and yet your spiritual body is starving. So actually, instead of just focusing on eating the physical food, God requires us that we also eat what? His word. You see, His word is also what? Living bread. And we drink living water, which is of course what? As Jesus was referring to us, He is the living water that we actually drink and we do not thirst again. So your focus should not just be on the carnal food that you eat, but also what? On the spiritual side of it. That's why we fast and read the Bible, we fast and pray. So that is also a form of keeping yourself pure and taking in things that will actually bring out a lot of good in you, and then that will be counted as purity in the eyes of God. And then the second place is, of course, the things that we see through our eyes, things that we receive through our eyes. So, of course, our eyes, they see many things, and sometimes it's very difficult to know what you will see, because mostly you will see something before you actually know you've seen something. So it can be a challenge, but then it calls for us to be very proactive in terms of restricting the things we can look at and the things we cannot look at, so that our eyes are pure enough, and that what comes in through our eyes is actually good, and that it shapes our internal structure based on the good things that we see. Then the last one, of course, it's the ears. Mostly that will do with things like the music we listen to, the kind of stories we engage in, and the kind of words that we actually hear from people as they speak. So, as you know, the world that we live in currently has some very defining words that people do use. And sadly, there are more and more people who are using those words every other day. So what you need to do is that try and minimize any kind of things that you suspect will have those wicked words that people use, so that you don't end up taking in that wickedness. Because if you can keep wickedness out of your ears, then it will be easier to keep your internal system clean. And with your internal system clean, it will be easy for you to produce what? Good out of you. And that good that comes out of you, of course, it will be counted as purity. And then you realize that because of the so much purity within you and around you, it makes it very easy for also God to draw closer to you, because God is also pure. So for those of you who do ask about how do I attract the presence of God, it's mostly about living a pure life. The third question, is it normal to pray in tongues and feel nothing? Yes, I would say it is normal for people to pray in tongues and feel nothing, but it is not a good thing. And I will explain to you why. For a number of people, and actually I would say majority of people, they do pray in tongues and do not feel anything at all. Now, this does happen for two main reasons. Reason number one is that these people, they do not expect anything. Like in terms of spiritually speaking, they have no spiritual expectations. So when they go to pray, of course, with no spiritual expectations, if you don't have any spiritual expectation, then there is nothing for God to fulfill. So you will feel nothing. And you may be asking yourself, or you may be asking now, what is a spiritual expectation and how do you set a spiritual expectation? And I'll tell you, it's very simple. When Jesus was speaking to us in the book of Matthew, he was saying, ask and you will receive, seek and you'll find, knock and the door shall be open for you. So anytime you go into prayer, there has to be what? You are either asking, you are either seeking, or you are either knocking. But there has to be some drive that takes you into prayer. So when it comes to seeking, there are very many things you can seek. You can seek God himself, you can seek knowledge, you can seek wisdom, you can seek purity, you can seek joy, you can ask for peace, you can ask for many things, you see. And then there are very many spiritual doors that you can actually go and knock on those doors. Now, what happens is that there are people who go into prayer, but they don't have anything that they are seeking, they don't have anything that they are asking for. More especially when people are praying in tongues, because there is this assumption that when you pray in tongues, you really don't have to know what you are praying for, that the Holy Spirit will just intercede for you. But you see, there is something called a desire. And the Bible talks about this desire, where like in Psalms, where the Bible says that the Lord will take delight in the Lord and you will fulfill the desires of your heart. So you see, the desire of your heart is within your heart. You see, it is something with you that is with you. You generate it yourself. It's something completely in your will that you generate. So when you go with it before God and God is pleased with you, he fulfills that thing that actually belongs to you. And that is how you get satisfaction. But now there are people who go into prayer, but they don't have this desire. They don't have a desire to receive anything like knowledge, or maybe they don't have a desire for anything at all. So for those kind of people, even if they want to get a breakthrough and have access to God, there is nothing for God to fulfill. So for them, they'll just feel it's just completely dry. So that's why it's very important to have some desire within you. So even if you see, like, it doesn't have to be anything complicated. It may just be something like, I just want to feel loved. I just want to feel the love of God. And that is a desire. So that when you go to pray, you are automatically doing what? Have a desire in you of, I want to feel God's love. So that when you appear before God, when God looks at you, he sees that you desire what? His love. So he will shower you with his love. Maybe you have been experiencing a lot of peace in your life and you are praying. So you say, I want to experience a new level of peace. So when you do that just in your heart, if you just desire a new level of peace, you say, yes, I do have peace, but I'm sure there is a newer level of peace. There is a higher level of peace. So that when you go to pray, when God sees that desire, you will just do it. You will just be prompted to actually fulfill it. And the stronger the desire that you have, actually, the easier it is for you to feel like your tongues are actually effective. Because the more hunger you have, the easier it is for God to actually fulfill it. So for those of you who pray and then you say you don't feel anything, one of the reasons is because what? You don't have a strong desire. And that is something that you need to cultivate and always have a desire when you go to pray in tongues. Even if it is not a specific physical thing, because I'm sure most people, when they're going to God, they may be going for things like finances, or they're going for things like, you see, mostly the physical needs. But then I would encourage you to discard the physical needs, because those ones, God knows that you need them, just as he tells us. He knows that you need them and he will fulfill them. But more, go for the spiritual ones. and desire to grow in deeper levels in the spiritual gifts that you already have. When you do that, you will realize that praying in tongues actually has some direction, and that it doesn't feel plain and boring as if you are doing nothing. The second reason why some people feel nothing when they are praying in tongues is because they don't have spiritual senses. So if you don't have spiritual senses, of course, spiritual things will just be happening around you. But because you don't have the senses, then you can't feel them. You can't notice them when they are happening around you. And this mostly just comes down to the level of faith that people have. I have met a number of people whom you will be praying in tongues together, and then the Lord does a very obvious sign, but these people end up doubting that sign, and they don't even attribute it to God because it just looks a little too coincidental. So they would rather brush it off as a coincidence rather than actually believe that it is God trying to communicate something to them. So they come out of there saying they feel nothing, but in real sense, God was trying to prompt them with easy signs, because when God is prompting you, He'll usually begin with signs that are easy for you to understand as He goes deeper. But now, if you don't even grasp those easy signs, then of course He will just do what? He will just leave you alone because you don't have faith. And as we know from the Bible, we can't please God without faith. So actually, you are boring before God if you don't take up His signs. It's more like dating. If somebody is in the dating phase, they are going to show signs, and it's up to the other partner to pick up on those signs. If the other person does not pick up on those signs, then the other person is boring. So it's the same thing that happens with God. When you are drawing closer to Him and He is drawing closer to you, you will usually give those signs. So you have to grasp them. So the more you grasp them, the more interest He develops in giving even more signs, and then a relationship is built from there. So you may be asking yourself, how do you develop your spiritual senses so that you notice the spiritual activities going around you? And this is a simple thing. Mostly, I'll say start with reading the Bible. Reason being, when you read the Bible, you will actually start noticing how the spiritual activities transform into the physical. You see, simple things like the birth of Jesus. You see, it was a prophecy, like it was a fulfillment of very many prophecies when it actually happened. So people who had known the prophecies when it actually happened, they easily believed it, and they were amazed by the miraculous happenings of that time. But those people who had not read the prophecies, they just assumed that it was just another child born, and it didn't bother them. It completely didn't bother them that a special child had been born. But those who had studied the scriptures, they actually knew that a child will be born. So when you study the scriptures, what will happen is that it will be easier for you to translate and know spiritual occurrences when they happen in the physical. And then you just go from there. Now, it will now become easier to start grasping newer things that are happening today in the spiritual realm and being translated into the physical compared to like what used to happen in biblical times. But of course, you start with biblical times because there is what has already happened and has already been confirmed. Now, with your spiritual senses, they are basically just the physical senses. The only difference is that with spiritual senses, there are more things that you can actually detect more than the physical senses. Because with the physical senses, you can only feel, like your skin will mostly feel heat or cold. So you're either feeling hot or cold on your skin. And then with your tongue, you're only feeling the taste. With your ears, you're only hearing sound. With your eyes, you're only seeing light, because it's either light or no light. Basically, that's what vision comes down to. Now, in the spiritual realm, there are more things to feel apart from the heat or cold, the taste, the sound waves, and the light. there are more things that you can actually perceive. So what happens is that the more time you spend in the spiritual realm, you'll be interacting with these sensations. These are spiritual waves, and these are spiritual, how do I call them? The spiritual energies, the energy of the spiritual realm. So the more you interact with them, the easier it becomes for you to, like, you get accustomed to them, and then you start detecting them more and more. There are people who will just walk to a place and then they will hear a change in the smell. And that change in smell is not actually a physical change in the physical smell, but actually in the spiritual realm. And then they can interpret and tell that this place, there is a lot of wickedness, because probably the smell is a bad smell. And then there are people who even are sharper to a point that even just from the smell, they can tell what? That there is a certain demon or probably an evil spirit of a certain kind. Others just from the smell can tell that there is an angel of this and that, because different beings in the spiritual realm have different smells. And that happens when your smell is sharp. Then the same thing applies to your vision. So your vision also, it's something that you train in the spiritual realm. Mostly it begins with dreams, simple dreams. So when you start having dreams, you will usually see things. So how you see dreams is the entry level of seeing in the spiritual realm. Now what happens is that if you pay attention to what you see, basically by just writing down your dreams and trying to interpret them, or just trying to look for patterns in your dreams and all that. So the moment you just show interest in those spiritual things that you are seeing, then of course God gets more interested in doing what? Showing you more things, so that you learn and grow your vision in the spiritual realm. Same things to how you hear. If you pay attention to any kind of sounds that you hear, then of course, the more you do it in prayer, then of course, your hearing in the spirit will be sharpened. And then there are more things that you will now be experiencing in the spiritual realm that cannot be felt in the physical. Like there are more colors that actually exist in the spiritual realm than in the physical realm. So our normal eyes, you will be expecting to see like the 7 colors, but you see in the spiritual realm, there are more colors. So those more colors, you can only see them when your spiritual eyes are now sharpened more than just the normal physical eyes that you do have. So spiritual senses, you train them, and of course, the more you exercise them, the sharper they become. So once you have those sharp spiritual senses, you'll find that it is very easy for you to do what? To actually sense spiritual occurrences around you, and praying in tongues will never feel boring. So question number 4, what is the impact of praying in tongues for an hour every day? This is a question that I find very common. People asking the impact of praying in tongues for 1 hour every day. Now, the idea of spending 1 hour of praying in tongues every day, mostly it springs from that Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus, the night before Jesus was arrested, that night he was praying, and of course he came to his disciples and said, could you not even pray for at least an hour? And so people assume that 1 hour is like the good minimum to aim for when you're praying in tongues, which is not really a bad conclusion to jump to. But then here is the thing. The impact of the tongues you speak, of course, it is determined by quite a number of factors, like what I've mentioned to you before. Your purity standards, your level of spiritual sensitivity, and of course, the amount of time. Now we are on this question that we are on, the amount of time you are spending in prayer. Now, let me tell you something. The amount of time you spend in prayer is very beneficial, but mostly in the sense that what? It lays a foundation. Now, For somebody who is praying in tongues for an hour every day, they have an hour every day as a chance to experience spiritual occurrences. If somebody is praying for like 30 minutes a day in tongues, then those people only have what? Half an hour to actually experience spiritual things. So the more time you dedicate to praying, it means that you have what? More time spent in the spiritual realm, which increases your chances of experiencing deeper spiritual things. The time you spend will mostly just earn you experience. And experience, of course, is very, very important when it comes to prayer. So that when you have spent a lot of time in prayer, you'll have spent a lot of time in the spiritual realm. And because you spend a lot of time in the spiritual realm, it is more likely that you will do what? Experience more things and see more things and get to interact with more spiritual things than somebody who spends less time there. In my own personal life, I did spend a lot of time, and even to this day, I do still spend a lot of time in prayer. Most of my prayer sessions are like between 30 minutes to 1 hour long. Even an average prayer session is that long. So because of that, many of these things that I have learned, I have received them because what? I spent a lot of time in the spiritual realm. So I was interacting and experiencing those things. And now because I was experiencing those things a lot, I began raising questions of why am I experiencing this? Why am I experiencing this? And then now the Lord had an opportunity to answer me and give me a revelation that would answer the questions I had. And based on that, I grew in knowledge and understanding of spiritual things. And you see now, it all comes down to I spent a lot of time in prayer. So I want you to see it more as the time you spend in prayer is the time you allow yourself to experience spiritual things and potential things that will actually help you. And that is why it is very important to actually pray in tongues for as long as you can. Now, when you dedicate yourself to pray in tongues for 1 hour every day, something will happen. It's either you'll be very much discouraged and give up, or two, is that what? You will experience very many spiritual encounters and very many spiritual occurrences and be motivated to keep going. Now, the difference is that what? For people who pray in tongues and have not put the other factors in place, they'll usually feel like praying in tongues every day is very boring, and they'll find it very difficult to actually even be consistent to pray in tongues every day. But for those who have those other factors in place, who are, of course, reading the Word of God and who are striving to live a pure life, when they're doing the other things right, you'll usually find that praying in tongues becomes very sweet, and even praying in tongues every day becomes very easy. And because it becomes easy, you start experiencing very many spiritual occurrences based on the desires within your heart and what you really want to acquire from the spiritual realm and what you want to actually learn from God. So when you start experiencing that, then it will motivate you to just keep going in terms of praying. And then you find that actually praying in tongues for an hour is a very enjoyable and sweet thing to do. And then the impact of those things, of course, it will just be so much manifold in your life, and your life will just be turned around completely, even in areas that you didn't expect, because the spiritual blessings that God gives to us, they do come with side effects. So you may be only asking for peace, but then when God is giving you His peace, He also brings to you what? On top of it, He gives you love and joy. So you find that you are very joyful, and that the love that is within your heart towards people actually increases. So you will usually find those very many side effects of the prayers that you are making every day. So do your best and allocate as much time as possible that you can to just pray and soak in the Spirit. It is very beneficial. Question number 5. What should I do if I feel very dry when praying in tongues? Now, most people who feel dry when they're praying in tongues, it happens because they are not open to God. And what do I mean by being open to God? Well, this is it. Praying in tongues is a form of communication. You are actually communicating with God. You are communicating in the spiritual realm. And this communication is between you and spiritual beings. That's something you need to understand. So when you say, like, you feel dry when praying in tongues, it mostly means because what? You are not communicating to anyone. And that's why it feels dry. It's more like talking to yourself. When you talk to yourself, you feel like you are a fool and your conversation is very dry because you are speaking to yourself. But when you are speaking to someone, you usually find the conversation interesting because there are new things that you are receiving, as opposed to when you speak to yourself, there is nothing new that you are receiving. So it naturally just becomes very boring. So spiritual realm also works in the same way, in that when you start praying, you are actually praying and speaking things to spiritual beings. So if you are speaking to angels, you'll usually get some feedback from the angels, and that feedback is actually what makes the conversation interesting. If you are praying to God, you will get some feedback from God, and that is what will make the conversation interesting. Even if you are casting out a demon, you see, the more you exert that power on that demon, there is the reaction that will come from the demon by it fleeing, and you will feel what? There is more peace because that evil spirit that was causing chaos has left. So there is some feedback that actually gives you joy and encouragement. So for many people who feel dry when they are praying in tongues, it means that what? They are not doing what? Like they're not passing any communication. And so you may ask yourself, how do I make sure that I pass communication when I am praying in tongues? And it goes back to that point that I mentioned before. You need to have a desire. You need to have some kind of something that you are seeking for. Because everything that you are seeking for in the spiritual realm, there is somebody who has it. There's somebody who holds it. So that if you are seeking for a certain breakthrough, then it means that you will have to pray to God. Then you will have to do what? Also give instructions to the angels who are supposed to do the fighting for you. And then after that, then you have to overcome some evil spirits to actually do what? Receive whatever you need to receive. So there is some kind of interaction with spiritual beings that will go on. And that only happens when you have a desire. But if you have no desire at all and you go to pray, then of course there is no need of angels being involved. And of course, demons also can't oppose you because they have nothing to actually oppose you for. So of course, you can't even wage war against evil spirits. At the same time, you can't communicate with God because you have no need of Him. Because what? You have no desire for Him to do for you. So at the end of the day, it just feels so boring. So actually, if praying in tongues feels boring and discouraging for you, this is what I would tell you to do. Go find strong reasons that make you pray. Say, my life is not peaceful, I need more peace in my life. And say, I'll pray in tongues that I may receive more peace. Say, I need more love in my life. I want to feel more, like I want to feel the warmth of God around me more than what I am feeling today. Or if you have never felt it, just say you want to feel the warmth of God. So when you go to pray, in your mind, you are just saying, I want to receive the warmth of God, the warmth of God. So make it a desire and let it sit in your heart so that as you pray, that desire will just drive you to like have interactions in the spiritual realm. And then those interactions are actually what will make your praying in tongues very, very interesting and very, very sweet. And it will not be boring anymore. Last question. Someone is asking, I am new to praying in tongues. What is the important thing that I should know? What is that one important thing that I need to know? So basically, this is more like advice to somebody who is new to praying in tongues. Now, because I was at one point new to praying in tongues and I have grown to this level, at least there are things I know that are important for you to do in the very beginning of you receiving the gift of praying in tongues. Now, of all the things that you can do in terms of growing in the gift of praying in tongues, the most important, I would say, is gaining knowledge. Now, this knowledge, of course, a big chunk of it is going to come from the Bible. And the knowledge in the Bible sometimes may look like it is unrelated to the things you actually want. And it may seem like, how will this knowledge help me actually be better at praying in tongues? A simple example is like reading stories of the Old Testament. Some of those stories, you will read them and you will not see how they connect to you growing in the gift of praying in tongues. But let me tell you something, and this is something you should always remember anytime you are dealing with spiritual things. There is no useless knowledge. There is never any useless knowledge. In the spiritual realm, what happens is that the knowledge you receive is actually done is just kept for you. And so what happens is that a day will come when you'll get another piece of information. And that knowledge will be now done linked to the knowledge that you gathered before. And that link will form something new. And that something new that will be formed will give you more power. So what happens is that when you read the Bible and get the knowledge of the Bible, it is the very basic spiritual knowledge. But what is not included there are the links between between the stories and the occurrences that are happening in your life and today. So what happens is that when you have gathered a lot of knowledge from the Bible and you go to pray, when now God is giving you revelations, He will just be linking what is happening to you in your life at the moment with something you read in the Bible. So basically, there will be a pattern that you read in the Bible from someone's story. And so when you are facing a certain situation in your life, God will just whisper to you and tell you that the situation you are facing right now is like the situation that this particular person faced in the Bible. And so from there you can now make a conclusion and know that if I take this path like what that person took, then at the end this will be the result. But you see, that connection, it is God that gives it to you. And that connection is only given to you when you have previous knowledge and this new knowledge. So when you receive the gift of praying in tongues, mostly you may not have a lot of spiritual knowledge, and you may wonder, where do I start gaining spiritual knowledge? Where do I begin to gather information that I can actually grow? And as I tell you, just go and read the Bible. Just read those stories. They are written in English, so just read it. And don't think much about it, and don't really force yourself to get things out of it. Just read it. And the more you read it, God will, of course, observe how you are gathering that information. And the more you gather it, then you will start making connections for you. And those connections, when they start coming in, that's when now you'll start saying, I'm receiving revelations from God. But in real sense, they are just connections of the knowledge that you have already gathered. That is also how God manages to regulate the amount of information that we receive. Because basically, the amount of knowledge you receive is based on how much information you gather. So when you gather a lot of information from the Bible, what will happen is that God will only come to link it to you. Take an example of someone who is invested in watching politics, and this person has also read the Bible. So what will happen is that God will be linking the political happenings of today and referring him to the biblical political scene that was there. Because of course there was politics in the biblical times. So when God starts linking those things to the current trends in politics, then He can now start revealing to you His plans that He has for the current political scene and the things that are happening. And then it comes out as prophecy, so that you can now start telling that the country is heading towards this direction. And it's that direction because God has referred you to a certain biblical trend that you read and you understood it in the Bible. So He links it to you to what is happening currently. And then, of course, from that you already have a prophecy. So actually that's how God gives you prophecies. That's how He gives you revelations. So that's what I'm saying. It is very important for you to start by reading the Word of God when you are new to praying in tongues, so that that knowledge comes in handy to help you operate in the spiritual realm. Because praying in tongues is mostly just a a form of communicating in the spiritual realm effectively. So if you have more knowledge, of course, you can traverse the spiritual realm with a lot more authority and power because you have more knowledge. So there is more power invested in you because of the knowledge that you actually have. So I'll stop there for today. And again, if you have more questions that you want me to answer, of course, I will leave details on the screen. You can always ask those questions and I'll do my best to answer them for you so that you grow and also learn. And also remember that you can support this work with your donation. I will greatly appreciate because I do this work full time and your donations help me a lot in running this work. So that's it for today. God bless you.